I'm Caden Love.
And I'm Seema Love, his wife.
And we are Love and Lord, taking dark fantasy, light fantasy, and everything in between.
And speaking of darker shade of magic, this is what we read together recently, which we usually don't do. We usually read books separately, but we tried it together, and it's another book that our opinions differed at the end.
For those that aren't familiar with this, let's talk a little about what this book is about. This is by V.E. Schwab, and this is the first in her Shades of Magic series. Essentially, we're put in a world where there are 4 separate Londons. Even though a lot of them might be placed in different areas, they are all called London, and they are parallel dimensions.
Yes,
in a way.
it feels like it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we follow a character named Kel, and he is a servant for one of the nobilities in one of these Londons, and he has the ability to jump from London to London, which is a power that has been closed off since an outfalling of darker magic.
And then there's another character, Lila, who is just like a thief from another London. They end up meeting and going on an adventure together.
Mm-hmm. So that's the basis. I think that this is a book that is fun to go into not knowing too much about. And that's what we really tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I did look a little at some of the reviews from some of my fellow booktubers, and one that did kind of give it a harsher critique was Patrick Leo, and I have to agree with him in it. He did point out that a lot of this revolves around a MacGuffin device, which, if you aren't familiar with that, it is a plot device that just focuses the entire plot on an object. I will preface that it took a while for us to kind of figure out what the point of the story was, and when we get there, it does focus a lot on a character hunting down an object, trying to protect an object, and everybody going after this object. And I think that that's kind of where it fell flat for me.
Interesting, because that's something I actually appreciated about it. I do read more YA, so maybe I'm more used to this kind of plot device. And what I mean is, I like it when in a book there is a understandable plot, that I know what they're doing, I know what their end goal is, and while they're working on this problem, there is a foreshadowing, bigger, more global problem in the background that I know we will get into in future books. And I like it. I honestly struggle with a lot of higher fantasy that Caden likes, because I feel like often in the first book, instead of having this little plot that revolves in this situation around this object, it's just all set up. It's all being set up for action to start in the second book, and I don't like it. I think it's too slow for me. So I liked it that action started right away, and even though it didn't jump into the global problem right away, I was fine with it, because it was a nice time for me to get to know the characters and the world, because the world building was my favorite. I loved getting to know this world that Schwab built, because honestly, it's like one of my favorites from this year.
Mm-hmm. And I think the world building was the big strength. I mean, you can kind of already tell this book wasn't my favorite, but I don't think it's a bad book by any means. I enjoyed it, and I think the world building was the redeeming quality. When we first got in, it was a little difficult to kind of figure out if these separate Londons were adjacent towns calling themselves London, or if they were alternate dimensions. That kind of made a bit of an obstacle getting into it. But at the same time, it was all pretty familiar. Even though there is magic, we are set in an earlier 1900s London and similar areas. So it was pretty easy to get into. Mm-hmm. And there were hints at deeper secrets that are probably going to be explored in later novels, but it didn't become overwhelming. So the world was easy to get familiar with. I did really enjoy the idea of those 4 separate Londons, one being a complete wasteland after magic had overtaken it, another that is very cautious to use magic because of that reason, and then Red London, where Kel is from, where magic is very normal. And it was just interesting to see those different perspectives.
Oh yeah, I loved it. How the magic system itself, I don't think I really understand it even now after we finished the first book, but just the different ways that magic is approached in all these different Londons gives so many interesting perspectives, and I think it makes the whole world really rich.
Mm-hmm. And there are positives and negatives to that magic system. It does seem fairly elemental, like there's bone magic, blood magic, but then they're also saying spells like they do in Harry Potter. And, I'm kind of caught in between Joe Abercrombie's work where there is magic, but there is really no specific rule to it explained, and Brandon Sanderson, where you know every little intricacy. So we know certain things, but not too much. Just that Kel, the main character, can wield these types of magic. Some of them for healing that he uses there, some of them to jump between realms. And I thought it was interesting, but there isn't too much unique about the magic itself. It is just kind of magic. Like in Harry Potter, you have magic. And it's not allomancy where you can control metals, or like Malazan where you have warrens. There's not a specific type to it. It is just kind of seems like general magic.
Yeah, it is in its structure pretty generic magic, but I did think that it had a really specific vibe to it that I think added character to it.
And I think that was one of the refreshing things, is kind of the character, the feeling of this novel. That older London was kind of fun to go into.
And speaking of characters, both of us felt that the characters weren't the most interesting. Maybe Kaden more so, but even I thought that they were a little bit one-dimensional.
I definitely agree there. So Lila and Kel are our two main characters. There's a fair share of other ones. There's a Prince character that's very charismatic. I think he was an enjoyable addition to it. But as far as we go, we have Kel, who has a mysterious past, and that was honestly the best part about him. That is probably the only pull that would drive me to read the later novels, to know more about that. Honestly, he was a very flat character. There wasn't anything that really made me want to love him, hate him. He was just pretty neutral.
And even though both of us, like we said, felt that they were a little bit not very deep characters, I did think that the chemistry between them was done very well, which kind of redeemed the book a little bit for me. And I even ended up giving it 5 stars because just the combination of world building, pacing that was right for me, and the characters and chemistry between them, I thought it was great.
And to go to the other character, like Seema said, I think there was good chemistry, and on their own the characters weren't too great, but the contrasting personalities made them feel more alive. But my big problem was with Lila, that she was the type of thief that wanted to steal just because. She didn't seem to have very many morals, and I understand the presence of a morally gray character or even an evil character. We look at Sandan Glokta, who does horrible things, but he's a character you love for some reason. If we're going to go with the thief trope, Locke Lamora is one of the greatest thief characters out there, and you love him despite some of the horrible things that he does. But Lila just feels like a bad person. I just really didn't like her. She seemed like she was willing to murder Kel just to get an upper hand if she needed to, and she made multiple threats throughout the time, even though you see this friendship between them, and that really pulled back from the score that I wanted to give this novel in the end.
And I just realized, isn't it funny that Lila from Dark Shade of Magic and Lila from Umbrella Academy basically have the same personality and the same character problem? They're both sassy and not really moral for, like, no reason. Like, apparently, of course, they had, like, hard past, probably. But I feel like even if you have a character that is like that, you gotta have, like, some light to them. Okay, so what is the overall score you gave this book?
Okay, a little explanation before we give it that complete score. We had the plot is where it kind of failed for me. With the great world building and the different political systems in the other Londons, I think that this could have been a great political thriller, which maybe it does become in the later books. I think it fell flat to focus on the MacGuffin device, and even to reach that point, it took almost half the book to get there. The characters were pretty flat for me, and honestly, I feel like I'm more of a plot-driven reader, but I do need good characters, and these characters just weren't too rewarding for me. And there are points where the book lacked clarity where I would have preferred to have it. So overall, I would give this book a 6 out of 10. 3 stars if you're a star kind of person. I think the world building was good. I honestly think the next book is probably a lot better, but for the time being, am not driven to read it. I did not enjoy this book enough to really want to read the series continually. If Seema wants to and we read it together, I think it could be fun. But there are so many other books that I'd rather read before this that at the time it is not on my TBR.
Okay, well, that is one book that I will be reading in 2025 because I really loved it. And out of 10, I would have given it probably 9. 1 point being taken for I get a little bit one-dimensional characters. But if you like YA books like me, you'll love it.
Well, noting that V.E. Schwab is a very popular author, I do know that she has another release coming out next year that, from what I've heard, it does sound pretty interesting. I know a lot of people love The Indivisible Life of Addie LaRue, so if you're a V.E. Schwab fan, let us know in the comments what you think her best book is. I am interested in potentially checking out other things. I do think that she's a good writer, but this book just didn't really do it for me.
So yeah, let us know your opinions, and thank you for watching.